What's up? I am David Long, live Q&A number 6. Hope everybody's doing well. What's up, Brett? How you doing today? Saw your question, so I'm definitely going to get into that a little bit. I think that's a great question. What's up, Caleb? Hope you're doing well. What's up, David? Some people jumping in right away. It's great to see everybody. Hope everybody's doing really well today. Make sure you post your questions down below. I'll try to get to all of them if I can. So, probably some of you guys have seen the Davidian versus Wilberian Integral thing that came out pretty recently. If you haven't, you should probably check that out after this. It's sort of a complement to my What You Talking About Wilber series, where that series is very much going to be focused on being critical and fleshing out the problems that I see with Wilber and the way he talks about and presents integral. This is kind of more like the other side of it, like this is how I think it affects the map, and these are the ways that I would want to work to refine the map, and it's kind of a step in that direction and the beginning of an invitation for us to be able to talk about these things together. And I think this is going to be one of the main things that we end up talking about today in this group, the beginning of some of these kinds of ideas and thinking about how and where we're going to be able to work on this stuff together. If you have any questions or comments about refinements to the map or anything like that, make sure and post them down below. We'll get into some of that. Putting the finishing touches on the new integral review. Also working on editing together some of the responses to Mario's criticism. What's up, Steve? Hope you're doing well. So one thing I want to talk about is that people like Steve and some other people have been really excited about the Wilberian thing and have sent me criticisms and refinements and stuff like that. And I'm currently working on a video response that I got from Oliver, I believe. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm a little bit biased in favor of video responses. If a person makes a video response to something I did, I'm going to be a lot more likely to make a video response in response, whereas if a person just writes something to me, I'm probably just going to quickly write them back. So make video content, and I'll make video content, and we'll get a lot more awesome content that way, and you'll be able to show your beautiful faces in some of my videos because I'll feature you. So that'll be cool. It'll be more about the community and stuff. But what I'm thinking of right now is what's going to be the best place to host this conversation. And at the end of the day, I don't want it to be ultimately rooted in and based on my opinion. I want this thing to be fair and open and transparent. And so I'm really interested in how we can figure out a platform or some kind of something to be able to do that. What I'm already thinking, I don't want to spoil too much of what I want to talk about in this up and coming video, is there's going to be a pretty good way to start to organize the types of criticisms that we get. So there are some suggestions that are going to be purely aesthetic about how we can upgrade the look of the map, or maybe the way that things are positioned on the map. Like this is one of the things that Steve was bringing up in some of his suggestions, moving quadrants to the upper left and then moving the spiral around to the other side. I think there are aesthetic reasons why I didn't do that, and we could talk about that. Of course, we should talk about that. Maybe we don't need to go into details about all of that stuff right here and now. But so there's aesthetic things that have to do with the look, and then there's going to be these particular ideas about how to change the details to be more in line with what we think to be the real truth, or like the best way to talk about these things. What's up, Daniel? Talking about potential types of changes in the map and how to categorize those different types of changes, right? So on one hand, you have like the more purely aesthetic, just things about the way that it looks. On the other hand, you have more about wanting to change the details on the map itself. And then there's this kind of middle place where it's not necessarily about just the look or just the data, but how we can present the data in a way that is going to be more understandable when people look at it. So there's just the aesthetic stuff, there's getting it more right, and there's refining the presentation. But I think if we find a good platform, we can start to organize the types of criticism. So for example, we could categorize these things. There could be a folder for suggestions about the overall look of the thing. And then we could catalog all those different suggestions. And anytime anyone has a suggestion about how to change the look of it, we could keep track of all that. And then quadrants. There's going to be a bunch of suggestions all related to the quadrants. What people might want to change about details in the quadrants, how people might want to represent the quadrants, or even aesthetic variations of the quadrants. So there are these different ways of trying to upgrade the map in terms of each aspect. And I think that we can map all these things out. There's going to be a lot of overlapping things too. A lot of people are going to make the same suggestions multiple times. So in these kinds of spaces, we can start to deal with some of these issues and have debates around them. If we decide not to go with a person's ideas, or if we decide not to include a person's suggestions, there we would at least make an argument for why or why not. Then that could be further criticized, and we could further build on this and expand on this stuff together. Let's see, in infographics, let me know if you want another mic. Yeah, Daniel, definitely, if you have ideas about how to make changes, I would suggest don't just ask me about it, make your version. If you think, like Steve was saying, he has this idea about putting the quadrants on the left side and the spiral on the right side. The reason I didn't do that is, let's look at it real quick. The reason I didn't wind up doing that is because if we did move this part to that side, then you would have the quadrants up against the back of the spiral, which would be right in the middle, And I mean, yeah, I guess that could be good, but then you have like the stages and the lines and stuff like all crammed up here over against the side. I mean, hey, maybe you think that would look good, make a version of it, and let's see if people like it more. So I mean, we're kind of already getting into it. Maybe we could jump into some of these questions a little bit. One of the other things that Steve was bringing up, he was talking about how stages of development is kind of talking about time and the unfolding of evolution, and he was saying how this map over here also has to do with time, but he wasn't sure exactly what is the point of an AQAL map. Like, why are things on there and what are we trying to do with it? This is a really important, good question to start with, because the things that are on this AQAL map are what we need to be able to teach people integral theory. And so a quick checklist to make sure that we understand what's going on in the territory. It's called AQAL, which implies all quadrants, all levels, all lines, and all states and all types. So basically the only thing that's going to be on this map are quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. And really we want it to be a simplicity on the other side of complexity. He was thinking that it might be interesting to include the rise of man, like evolution pictures and migration patterns of men. These are a couple things that I don't think would probably make it onto this map. The only reason I've even included this part of the map is because this in particular is an emergentist perspective on AQAL. The reason it's on there is if you're talking to people and you're making this distinction about idealism versus emergentism, which is actually an important distinction within our community. And it ties into this part up here with epistemology and ontology. I'm trying to get in there so you can see this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. So this has to do with the arising of the quadrants. So you get the full metaphysical picture there. So the arising of the quadrants on ontology and the order in which we can perceive the quadrants in terms of epistemology. So instead of getting this tetra arising all the way down and all the way back, you get this idea of an emergent arising. So this is relevant within the context of our larger conversation in integral. In terms of AQAL, this map is extra. I only included in there to reference for the people who do think that consciousness goes all the way down and back. And the problem with including the evolution from monkeys to men into the spiral is that I don't think it's accurate. I think it's pretty clear that all living creatures evolve up through the spiral. So let me give you an example. I would say that right now, my dog is learning how to be a good traditional conformist. She was a lot more impulsive, egoic when I got her, and over the years, she's learning to be a good girl. She's very smart. So she's going through these stages too. And some of these worker dogs, some of these problem-solving dogs and stuff, they're really smart. I would say some of these dogs are rational achievers. So the idea, it would go from these less evolved animals and apes up into people, and that's where the spiral starts, I would say is incorrect. Every living being is on this spiral. This is not just for humans. Now, not every living being gets very high on this spiral, but so I could see why people might make that mistake, but every living being is on this spiral. So things like that. These are some of the kinds of arguments that need to be cataloged. And someone was asking me earlier, we were talking about some criticisms around like the Briggs-Myers types and stuff like that, the Enneagram. Some of this stuff is actually not super scientific, and there are valid criticisms to be made about some of these things. And there needs to be a place for us to be able to have these conversations, for people to be able to go back and reference some of this stuff, and to engage with the conversation in a reasonable way. Now, Brett Hendrick asks, is this map anti-theist? Integral theory and integral practitioners are supposed to be trans-rational. Now, a lot of people get confused about what trans-rational means. I've made some videos about this stuff, but basically, trans-rationality has to do with metaphor or poetry. So the idea is that if you take your symbols literally, that's probably pre-rational and superstitious. Now, if you take your symbols poetically, then there's not necessarily a problem with you getting something good or valuable or meaningful out of it, as long as you're not too attached to your symbols. Like, for example, I would say that I 100% live my life for God. God meaning the absolute. Like, I'm 100% invested in this project of the universe and life and being here for service, being a part of the body of Christ, or realizing a Buddha nature, or however you want to talk about it, right? So I'm all about that. So if that's what you mean by a theistic perspective, great. But if you think we can make these kinds of claims about the absolute nature of reality, that's probably overstepping our bounds in terms of epistemology. And this leads us nicely into some of these next questions. Let's see, I'm just going to reference the questions on my computer real quick. Let's see. How can we reasonably and meaningfully compare and validate our interior experiences and knowing with each other? This is what Jason Grant is asking. How can we reasonably and meaningfully compare and validate our interior experiences and knowing with each other? Okay, so this is getting complicated because we don't necessarily need other people to validate our interior experiences. If we felt something and we're honest with ourselves about what we feel, we know that we felt it. Now, what we can validate are claims about the truth of exterior reality, right? So it's one thing to say that you had some kind of an amazing experience. It's a whole other thing to say that there are true things that happened about reality, or the true things about the way the reality works. And we can validate these things. This is where an epistemology comes into play. And integral has the best epistemology. Integral methodological pluralism is where it's at. And I have a video about this. It's called Different Types of Truth or Integral Epistemology, Different Types of Truth. It's on my YouTube page. I'll post it below. You should definitely check this out because we do have methods and validation processes for how we come at our knowledge, and this is super important stuff. It's like majorly foundational. If a person doesn't have a good epistemology, they don't have a good worldview, because this is the integration process. This is how we integrate diversity with discernment, is we are super honest with ourselves. Going back to this question, is this map anti-theist? I kind of consider myself to be a hard agnostic when it comes to the absolute and all of this stuff. What's up, Paul? Hope you're doing well, bud. Just talking about epistemology, buddy. So I think that we should start with this Descartes kind of like, what's the bare minimum that I could say that I know, and build from there. We shouldn't be working backwards from any kinds of pre-given assumptions. Everything is up for criticism, and to some extent, everything has to prove itself. That would be my general position about how to start. And definitely Integral has, like I said, this integral epistemology or this integral methodological pluralism. Let's go back to the map real quick. That's what these zones are. These different circles on the map right here, zone 1, zone 2. Basically, these are things like a first-person perspective on a first-person perspective is phenomenology. Third-person perspective on a third-person perspective is empiricism. And so there's an inside and an outside within each one of the quadrants, and each one of these things have to do with a different approach to different types of truth. So if you want to get at a particular aspect of reality or figure out a particular truth claim, you have to employ these different methods to get at these different aspects of the truth. And if we use all of these different methods, which is kind of what Integral is trying to do, we can actually get at the most holistic view of truth possible. So okay, let me go back to another question. When does one know the integral theory map and can say that they can reliably move forward in practice with confidence that their map is knowledge and sound and complete? This is a great question, and Steve brings up underneath that this idea of no one can reliably know that their map is sounding complete, and he brings up this idea of fallibilism. Now, from what I understand about fallibilism, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because it's saying that you're here now, but from what I understand about fallibilism, basically it's this idea like everything is kind of always questionable or always up for grabs. And maybe this is true, like we should always be willing to question anything, but I think the point of skepticism, the point of having an open mind, is so that way your mind kind of closes around an understanding of something, right? So I'm open-minded about whether evolution is true, but then the more and more I learn about evolution, the more I understand that it is true. And so if somebody says something about it, I'm not just like, oh, well, you know, it's all questionable. I'll be like, no, we actually have proven a lot of things around it. Now, you might be able to make small adjustments here or there, but a lot of that stuff is really firm and is not going to be changing anytime soon. And I think that we're not too far off from that kind of stuff in the basic outline of our map. There needs to be a little bit of refinement done. And I think it should be open to refinement. I think that we always need to be able to have this conversation. And having the conversation about how to refine the map or what should be on the map or why things are on the map or how they appear on the, like that kind of stuff, that's like fine-tuning the details not only on the map, but on people's understanding of the map. So it's almost more important to be able to have this kind of open dialogue around the thing, more for people to even understand it than it is to better the map. I really think that's true. I think we're getting close to having a really, really good map. In fact, the small refinements that I made are just in the direction of things that we already mostly know. Wilber has broken his own rules and overstepped his bounds and worked backwards from his preferences and uncritically tried to adjust theories based on what he likes, not based on science. Like the fact that he thinks that he can sneak Aurobindo into this meta-analysis of psychological lines, it's more than just sneaky. It is a real perversion. And I mean, like, to do that to Don Beck and his work, even from like a scientific perspective, it's just like, I don't know what he's doing. He's really sure about some very mystical ideas that haven't really proved themselves, and he really thinks that he can kind of predict that his view will prove itself to be true. But I think that's really dangerous. Coming from a more religious home and a religious background and thinking about what it is to be a teacher, to me, it's really important to me that I don't ever want to be a misleader. I don't ever want to confuse people. I don't ever want to pretend like I know something that I don't know. If I'm telling you something, it's something I think I can back up with good reasons and evidence. I don't just talk shit over here. I'm critical in terms of my own perspective and others, and I wouldn't ever want to mislead anybody. So that's super important to me. I wouldn't make a claim that I couldn't back up. And these claims that Wilber is making about the absolute, about I amness before the Big Bang and stuff like that, are claims beyond anyone's ability to know. They're literally qualifying the unqualifiable and taking a certain set of religious dogmatic ideas about a creation myth from one culture, literally. Okay. Brett asks about the Ken Wilber diss track. So, okay, I originally thought about ending my Steve McIntosh video with some kind of a diss track. I thought that would be kind of fun, right? It's like, yeah, now that I've knocked down your ideas philosophically, now I'm going to destroy you in rhyme form. I think it's a fun idea, but I didn't really get around to it. And I've definitely thought about this idea of a Ken Wilber diss track. I'm thinking that probably what I will do, let's see, about the dissing of Wilber, disagree that you should do it. Okay, Steve says I shouldn't do it, but here's what I'm thinking. Hear me out on this, Steve. Basically, my thought is, maybe once I finish my full What You Talking About Wilber series, maybe on the back of that, or as like the cherry on top or something like that. I'll try to compress a lot of the criticisms and distinctions down into some kind of a diss track. That might be fun. Even someone was saying today, they were like talking about how they thought that my What You Talking About Wilber videos are disrespectful of Wilber, talking about the Emperor Has No Clothes and Integral Naked and stuff like that. I tried to make it clear in my first video that my intention is not really to debunk Wilber, and I'm grateful to Wilber for all that I've learned from him. This dude, he might have messed up his project a little bit, but I was kind of already working in the direction of his project, and honestly, this guy has saved us like 30 years of work. He's done a lot of really good and important work. The tweaks that I'm doing to the integral map are pretty minor, so my criticisms of him, when I joke about him and stuff like that, it's just meant to be fun and playful and lighthearted. If I was making videos about Nietzsche or something like that, I like Nietzsche, but I'd be making fun of his mustache and, you know, just trying to keep it fun and lighthearted. So if I did a Wilber diss track, it wouldn't be like a serious, like, yeah, now I got it would be like a fun and silly, lighthearted kind of a diss track, because at the end of the day, a lot of the reason why I do things the way that I do them is because I don't want these things to be super academic and boring and dry. I want them to be fun and young and lighthearted and cool and not like mean or angry or like having all of these kinds of negative feelings behind it. I think philosophy is fun, and yeah, these ideas are super important. They definitely matter, but I think we could talk about them in a lighthearted kind of way. So, is there a way to deduce bigger reality without evidence? What do theological, physicists do in regard to that? Is the mind capable of deducing the unknown? At least to some extent. Okay, so I'm thinking about how I want to answer this question. Basically, Jason is asking, is there a way to deduce bigger reality without evidence? Is the mind capable of deducing the unknown, at least to some extent? Personal experience is really limited, and there are some major blocks or potential issues with our ability to be able to say that we understand the world, because our relative maps of things are not the things in themselves. The map is not the territory. Our subjective perspective is incredibly limited. It's limited by time and space. This historical perspective, 2018, here on Earth. Like, think about the limits of the senses. Even when you think what you think, it has to go from being a thought in your head up here, like translated into words, then made into sounds or letters that then I have to reconstruct on my side and use my set of symbols to be able to try and understand what you mean. So there are these multiple levels of translation that things go through, even when we're trying to talk about some really basic stuff, right? Because your understanding of what words mean and my understanding of what words mean are probably not perfect matches onto each other. So when you take your ideas from up here and then you translate them into words and you send them to me and then I have to retranslate them, am I actually getting the same thing that you have on your side? Are we really communicating? That's why there's this kind of long process of talk and debate. I mean, this is actually, if you watch some of the talks that Jason and I have, like a lot of it is just us trying to figure out how to align our mind maps with each other. There's also the limits of our senses. Not only can we only see so far, we've only experienced so much, and everything we know has been communicated to us. We're constantly seeing everything through this relative map of reality that's been communicated to us. So basically what I'm saying is, he's basically asking, like, can we know the big picture, absolute truth? Can we deduce it somehow without evidence, is what he asked. Is the mind capable of deducing the unknown, at least to some extent? I guess it depends on what he means by the unknown in this context. Like, do I think that we can have some ability to reasonably predict future events? Yeah, you know, but can we know the absolute truth? I guess it depends on what you're talking about, absolute truth. Like, you know, can we know the absolute truth of this water bottle? We have water bottle and wet and plastic and like a bunch of descriptive things to be able to talk about it, but that's all just English. The unknown, what are we talking about there? Are we talking about the absolute truth of reality? If so, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say it is absolutely unknowable, and that's why making claims about it is always gonna be unreasonable. Claims about consciousness before the Big Bang or something like that are unfounded, unreasonable claims. And the reason that we're making these claims in the first place, as I'm saying, like everything we know has been communicated to us. These ideas don't come from nowhere. We know where they come from. We know that they're rooted in these outdated ideas by people who existed before we understood the micro and macro scale of reality. And their ideas reflect this. Their ideas reflect their lack of understanding about the fractal holonic nature of reality. Let's go back to some more questions. What is a meaningful way to carry out an integral assessment of a person in a relatively quick and reliable way? This is a difficult question, but it's pretty crucial. We need to know how to figure out where a person's at pretty quick. Here's one quick way you can go about figuring out where a person's at. Ask them what their relationship to something like religion or spirituality is. This is very telling. It's very, very telling. So if they say that they're a religious believer, that right there tells you pretty quickly that they have some blue ideas. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are at blue. I'm plugging in my phone because it's dying on me, and that's not good. So let's say they tell you that they're a Christian. Now you can dig a little bit deeper. You could try to figure out what kind of a Christian they are. From there, you can ask them how literally they take it. Like maybe you could ask them about how they feel about homosexuals or how they feel about women in leadership. That might be a relatively more safe way to go than the homosexual thing. But that will tell you something about how moderate they are. If they're more willing to pick and choose from the Bible, they might be at more of like an orange or green kind of stage. So you can dig in a little bit more to their philosophy around that. And that'll kind of give you a general idea about kind of where they're at and how you can start to engage with them. That's doing it within the context of Christianity or something like that. I mean, they might be like, oh, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in that shit, right? Okay, that almost immediately tells you that they're probably around an orange kind of altitude. Maybe they say they never really grew up in a religious home or around any of that kind of stuff. So you might have to find some other way of figuring out where they're at in the spiral. I think once you get kind of good at identifying what the archetypes are, people kind of dress and act like their stage of development. We live in a very modern society, so you get a lot of modern dressing people as kind of a norm, but maybe your more conservative people will dress a little bit more conservatively, a little bit more traditionally, perhaps, whereas your more postmodernist people, they dress like hippies a lot of the time. I'm not saying that you can tell based on how a person is dressed, but people like to wear logos and banners and all kinds of, like, I mean, you can almost tell by looking at someone's bumper stickers on their car. If they got a COEXIST bumper sticker on their car, that's green. You could tell by their ornaments. Like, look at me wearing this hat. A person who's wearing this hat is a postmodern plus thinker. I would bet money on it. A Christian doesn't resonate with this hat. An atheist probably doesn't resonate with this hat. Okay, it's a little bit abstract there. I don't know if that's the answer for what constitutes an integral assessment. That's more of just like a quick stage assessment. But I think that's a good way to start, is with an assessment of a person's general altitude. We start there, and then we can start to figure out what their skills are. Maybe get into their lines, see what their passions are. Really, the more you talk to a person, the more they start to tell you, oh, I'm kind of introverted. I don't really like to go out that much, but this and this and this. Oh, I think that this and this is silly. I really value this. Like, people may not explicitly be telling you, I'm an INTJ or whatever it is, but they're telling you. If you know how to listen, if you know what these factors are, you know how to pay attention to hear them telling you these things. Man, I missed some questions here. Why is it important to figure out where a person is pretty quick? Oh, that's a good question. Why does it have to be pretty quick? Well, maybe it has to be kind of quick because we are not just, well, I'm going to be myself, as a spiral wizard or something like that. You want to be able to be skillful for other people, and that means avoiding their traps or their landmines or their particular issues that might be correlated to their state. So, I mean, like, if you're hanging out with a person who's traditional, you don't want to cuss as much, right? You don't want to be talking about God damn it and like, Jesus Christ and all this stuff. Like, they're not going to like that. That's going to make them really uncomfortable. And you're not going to talk about how stupid Christianity is or something like that if you get frustrated or whatever, and like, I to some extent kind of consider myself to be a Christian. So just as much as a Buddhist, just as much as an atheist or whatever. So I'm not trying to hate on Christians, but man, it's easy sometimes to be upset at fundamentalists. And because so many religious believers are fundamentalists, it's easy to be like, Christians, so annoying with their fundamentalism, right? It's really the fundamentalism that we don't like. But I see many regressive coexisters. Oh yeah, I mean, the coexist thing is a great example of one of the green pitfalls, which is the inauthenticity and interminable attempts at consensus, trying to act like we can all get along. To think that Islam and these other traditions, or fundamentalist Christianity and these other traditions, these traditions that are exclusive and want to spread their beliefs in the past, even at the point of a sword, these are not necessarily, at least not in the traditional fundamentalist ways, they're not even in favor of coexisting themselves. They don't want to coexist. They want to win. These are first-tier expressions. First-tier expressions don't want to coexist. Now, it's important to say here that all of the stages have to exist. We want healthy versions of every stage, but that doesn't mean the current version of the stage or expression of the stage is healthy and that we want to keep those going. Like, I mean, who knows? In the future, maybe 500 years from now, a lot of our old-fashioned systems will kind of go the way of Greek mythology, where it's like, we don't even talk about Christianity as a serious religion anymore. It might just be relegated to the realm of mythology, and it frankly should be. Which isn't to say that there aren't practices or whatever worth integrating. I think that's about it. I think we've been going for about an hour. I feel so blessed to have all of you guys hanging out today. I love my group. Who am I? I'm the universe in flux. I'm you. You are me, and we are all together. Big up Daniel. Big up Steve. Big up Brett. I feel so blessed to have all you here. Joey, you're here as well.
I am he as you are, he as you are, me, and we are all together.
This is a great time to say that I have finished recording my new album. It is done. Done recording. Now I'm just onto the mixing and mastering, and then I'm going to be onto the pressing and packaging, and then on to trying to figure out shows and tours and all that. The work doesn't end. You're like, yay, I'm done. Oh, that's good. Here's more work for you. Now see if you can start planning the CD release party and the mixing and mastering and pressing and packaging. Okay. But I feel good about this because finally finishing this album. I'm gonna kind of rest on it for a while. I'm really excited to potentially get to tour, maybe in the summer. Maybe I'll be able to come to a city near you. Maybe you can help me start to figure out people by where you live who might be good to play with. Maybe you can help me set up some shows in your area. Definitely, you might need to open your house for me because it sounds like it's gonna be expensive to travel. Definitely I could come to Denver, Daniel. That's not that far. I know there's lots of cool Integral people hanging out in Colorado. If we can find a place to play there and that stuff, I mean, I'm really hoping this next summer. Do I need beats? Well, I'm finished with my album now, but yeah, send me your beats, man. I'll definitely be interested in messing with beats. Yeah, Oregon, man, that's what's up, you guys. I really appreciate my community here that we got going, and I'm definitely looking forward to being able to have some of you guys on and to have these talks together live, to be able to come to your city and to meet up with you and to hang out. I swear to God, I'm not going to get a loft in Denver and just go hide out. I want to take this step on the road and make it public and make it fun and get the youth involved and see if we can really rock this shit. Oh yeah, I finished a season of vlogs. I got a whole new season of vlogs coming out. I'm going to this Flex Festival by me with my buddy. Okay, Daniel, you're allowed to hang out in your Denver loft because I know you're going to still put out tons of stuff on social media and be very active. I don't have a problem with the loft. It's the hiding in the loft that's the problem. Can you stay in my apartment? Nice. You guys are great. People right now are like blowing up this thread. I mean, I'm saying this for the YouTubers who are watching this later. People in the comments are blowing up the thread being like, come stay at my place. That's awesome. I love you guys. That's what's up. I'm feeling the love. I feel the love. I can't wait to come to your city and hang out and rock your city. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. I got my street team on lock. Alright, you guys, keep an eye out for these new videos coming out. You know I'm going to keep it popping. Things are going to be coming and coming and coming. It's going to be exhausting for me, but we're going to keep it moving. I'll sleep when I die. I love you guys. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for hanging out. Peace.